All right, welcome everyone to another COVID-19 recovery webinar. Today we'll be talking about the transition online for university orientation. So we have Ingrid and Athalia here with us, who will be talking about how they managed orientation this year for the incoming freshmen. So Cece, maybe you can take it from here.
Yeah. So our first question is, what are the overall planning process?
Hold on. Let's talk about their background first, just so we have a good idea of who everyone is. Go back.
Sure. Yeah. So both of them are third-year students, and for this year's orientation, they are orientation leaders. So they help freshmen transition from high school to university. If you guys, Ingrid and Athalia, if you have anything you want to add or just give a brief intro about yourselves, that'd be great.
Yeah, for sure. So we're both a part of St. Michael's College, and we've previously been orientation leaders before, but obviously this is our first one online, and just based on the training and the actual execution of the event, we've encountered many different challenges. We've enjoyed some parts a bit more than like usual, and other parts were a bit more difficult to handle with, but overall I'd say like both of us had a pretty good time. What would you say, Athalia?
Yeah, I would have to agree with you. It's definitely different, and just the way that we adapted to this year's version of orientation was definitely different than what we've had to do before. So it was nice, and it created a nice bonding experience for everybody, attending school this year.
Okay, so with that being said, let's now jump into our first question. What did the overall planning process for online orientation look like?
So for St. Michael's, we usually have orientation coordinators and then the marshals. So the events for this year were planned by them. And marshals facilitated the events and held workshops throughout the summer to help with the university experience for first year. So that includes stuff like budgeting around how to use transportation, managing your academics and time and stuff like that. As well, there was training for leaders, which also consisted of workshops, and those usually regarded like how to be a student leader. And usually these workshops are pretty standard from year to year, but this year, of course, we had to accommodate for it being online, so planning was a little more meticulous than it has been before. And of course, there's a lot of schedule changes that we had to accommodate to. And a lot of these trainings and stuff were also really focused on the online experience and just kind of making sure that orientation knew how to approach situations regarding online. So, for example, like if a student was, posting racist comments or rude comments online and that kind of stuff, they were kind of training us on how to approach the situations and how to do that in an online setting. And so I found that was different this year, just kind of how they had to shift the training so that it was more online focused, and that definitely helped us for the rest of the year. Did you have anything else to add, Ingrid?
Yeah, I would definitely agree with everything Athalia said. I think something super unique about this year's training, I really enjoyed how they definitely tailored it differently, just because I have participated in orientation before and I found the training to be super different from like what it'd usually be like. So it was definitely really helpful in allowing us to kind of identify issues. And because even like looking at us all now, all we can see about us are just like that one little box in that screen. We can't I could be like fidgeting with my fingers below, maybe like I'm signifying that I'm super nervous. But if I'm doing that below my screen, no one else can see that. So it was definitely a challenge for us to see how to approach students if they needed help, just because it was so much more harder to tell physically, and because it's just a lot harder online. You need to make sure that you're looking straight into the camera to kind of gain the attention of other orientees. And something that was super interesting about the training as well, while we were planning for it, was just discovering like the different ways to kind of engage students. And instead of just by identifying like physical, like what orientees were, how the orientees were responding, we kind of had to be more proactive in approaching them and asking them more directly, are you okay? How are you feeling? And I think that was just super interesting and something I didn't expect from orientation this year while planning for it. So yeah.
Okay, I will ask the second question. So hold on, let me move this over so you guys can read. So were there any advantages or things that didn't change when transitioning from in-person to online orientation? I know you mentioned like being able, you're being limited to only just the box, but do you think it was advantage in any way for like first years that for attending like orientation?
As in like advantages for being online during orientation for the orientees? I would say one advantage definitely for not just the orientees, but just everyone in general was that being online meant, if you lived far away, if you're a commuter from, let's say, one of the suburbs like Whitby, Richmond Hill, you're not going to have to wake up at 6 o'clock for the 10 a.m. like meetup time that we all have. You're probably like everyone else going to roll out of bed about like 9:30, 9:45, maybe if you're a little later. But it was definitely more, I think for the orientees, definitely it was more just the fact that you didn't have to travel or commute. That was a definite advantage. I think perhaps another advantage was that there was less pressure to be at all events, because definitely when it's a whole day thing, because orientation usually runs from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. and that's just for the orientees. It obviously one thing we mentioned to all orientees is that not all events are compulsory. We never want to force orientees to join things that they don't want to do. And I think the fact that it was harder to develop relationships online kind of helped those who were more intimidated by group settings to join events. And in that case, we would just, or at least I would personally just DM the orientees because we were all connected through social media. And again, I just ask, are you okay? How are you? And stuff like, we missed seeing you at this event, but maybe you can join this event if you wanted to. And it was more, I found that overall, and I was really grateful for this. I was really able to connect with my orientees one-on-one rather than as a group, which again, it's so hard to develop relationships online, but through even just like texting them, asking them how their day went, it allowed me to foster a closer relationship. And I think I'm still in touch with quite a few of my more orientees than I was when orientee was in person. Athalia, do you have anything to add on this topic specifically?
I mean, I think you hit a lot of the points on the head there, but I think the only thing I would have to add is it was easier for the first years to kind of join at their own pace, I would like to say, just because they had the option of turning on their camera, turning off their camera, turning on their mic or not, and they could also do that from the comfort of their own home. So I think it would be a little easier for them to kind of be comfortable in an online setting. So I think that was definitely an advantage for them.
Yeah, it sounds like there are advantages in having things online, but also there are like drawbacks which come with it. So it's kind of like they're like both sides of the situation, I feel like. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely. And if I might just add something, it was a little sad just to see like our orientees. They kind of, I think both Athalia and I, and like many other orientation leaders, we felt that one thing as leaders we tried not to do was talk about, oh, this was so fun when we did this as orientees, just because, you're only an orientee once, like you're never going to have an orientation week again. And to know that it was online, obviously it was a bit like, you know, disappointing, but we really tried to refrain from talking about our own experiences as orientees, just because, you know, they missed out on the parade this year, which usually is quite a big event at like the University of Toronto orientations. So we tried to really like make it about them and, you know, make the most of what we had at hand. But I think even then, sometimes orientees would still mention like, oh, like, I wonder what this would have been if it was in person. But again, we just tried to refrain from doing that.
Do you think like having orientation online allowed you guys to build more close relationships? Like I feel like you mentioned that you're able to maintain the relationships through like direct messaging them, but during the orientation sessions, like was it easier to talk to more people? Like how big were the calls like usually? With
Athalia, do you want to answer this one?
Yeah, for sure. So usually, of course, it differs throughout the events and throughout the week, but usually we had about between, I think, 10 to 15 to 20, I think would be our biggest students. But yeah, in terms of fostering community and like making those relationships, I think it was definitely easier the more the week went on, just because had, you know, more of a set group of people that were constantly showing up, and we were able to kind of create, we were able to kind of create like inside jokes or anything or something like that, so that, you know, it would be easier for us to relate with those people. And yeah, Ingrid, do you have anything else to add to that? Or
Yeah, definitely. If anything, I will say that our group was more actively engaged. I mean, I think it is just a thing with orientation every year, where you'll just have more first years who are super pumped about orientation and others who are more reluctant. And like, even during in-person orientation, it'll be the case that like on the Monday, it'll be a full like 30 people in your group, but then like eventually people find that orientation just isn't for them. And like by the end of the week, these groups would just get smaller and smaller, which just like is the case every year, just because orientation, again, it's just not everyone's cup of tea, which is fine. But yeah, I'd say like we retained quite a few orientees and we still remain close to them today. So I'm super grateful for that. Yeah.
Going off of that, I know you mentioned that it was easier for you to forge relationships with your orientees. I was just wondering, do you think it was easier because once you're online, you know, things are kind of slowed down for orientees to make friends with each other?
I actually think that one thing that really helped our orientees was just playing games, actually. So, you know, those awkward icebreakers that you have, the, you know, 2 truths, 1 lie, like everyone's played those before. It's really, you know, those icebreakers kind of just, if anything, make things a little more awkward. Like no one really wants to play them, but because everyone they all participate. So no one's like full effort was there. But we found like with games like Scriblio, which was extremely popular at the time, we found that a lot of orientees enjoyed that. And I think just like based on like how people like draw, people were able to, or like even just like the hints, the guesses that people made, it was able to kind of create conversation. So either like, oh, your drawing's extremely lovely, or the complete opposite, like, oh, your drawing doesn't look like what it's meant to be. It just like created conversation. And I think that really helped foster relationships between not only like even my co-leaders, but also like within the orientees themselves, and also between like us leaders and the orientees. So it was definitely playing games was a major factor. And even then we found that during orientation, they gave a lot of gifts away too. And just our group was super great in the fact that they were super competitive, loved playing games. And I think something that Athalia and I could like definitely say was that we definitely tried to encourage our orientees to just make random guesses, even if they weren't sure if they're correct. Because, you know, there's nothing to lose. Like, you know, you might get a $20 gift card or you get nothing, but you wouldn't get punished if you didn't try, you know? Do you have anything else to add, Athalia?
Yeah, I think that, yeah, playing games is definitely a big factor in helping us foster those relationships, especially because, again, they had the option of, inserting themselves in this conversation or not. And I think that helped them in, moving at their own pace and making them feel comfortable. And yeah, just the fact that they were all really competitive in games and, just encouraging them to participate was also something that played a huge factor in, I think, our relationship with the orientees.
Okay, great. So moving on to, I guess, the flip side of things, were there any significant challenges that you initially struggled with or overcame through your experience?
I think for us, it was mostly just ensuring student retention and just making sure that our orientees were, that they wanted to come and making sure that they were coming to these events. And I think as well, we had some challenges with time zones and just making sure that our events were, adequately timed for those, like in different time zones. And I think that, yeah, those are those are the big challenges that we had in orientation.
Yeah, definitely. If I could just add on to that, I think, yeah, definitely one of the biggest challenges was, you know, the time zone things. We only had one timetable for the entire week, which meant that all events started at 10 a.m. Toronto time and ended at 10 p.m. Toronto time too. But it was the case that what if one of our orientees in East Asia wanted to join a specific event, but, you know, it was 4 a.m. for them. So how could, like, there was no other timetable. So one of the events that we definitely struggled with is just telling orientees that, you know, there wasn't much we could do about it because there's only one timetable. And that was really like disappointing, I think, for us to just have to tell our orientees that. But I think something that you know, fingers crossed it isn't the case and we only have one online orientation ever. But I think definitely like going forward, having like 2 timetables would really help. And another challenge that we experienced was definitely just, you know, trying to figure out which orientees were enjoying orientation and which ones were kind of, you know, reluctant to join events, and figuring out why they were kind of reluctant to do so. Because if you didn't have trust, just like with any other relationship you have with someone, if you don't have trust, what makes you think they're going to open up to you and just kind of tell you like why they're feeling this way? And I think for that, we just kind of had to directly ask orientees like, oh, like we made sure, like even in like the big groups where like there would be like 300 participants on like a Zoom call, we like kept an eye on like our orientees name specifically and saw like kind of like every time they like muted themselves, turned off their camera, or like hopped off the call, and afterwards we kind of like direct message them and ask like, hey, is everything okay? We noticed that you like dipped off for a bit, like what's up? And I think just by paying close attention to them, we kind of, you know, fostered a deeper relationship more and kind of figured out why they might have not wanted to participate in a certain activity. So that was definitely a big challenge for us, just trying to figure out like what orientees, how they were feeling and how we could help them as well.
Tiffany, you're muted.
Okay. I was going to ask, when you guys were first being trained for this role, do you think that the training kind of prepared you well, or do you think like a lot of like unexpected things happen? I think the only thing you really mentioned was the time zones, but like besides that, was there things that came up that you guys didn't really like expect?
For me, I would have to say no, because at the beginning of orientation, a lot of us went into it thinking that we were at least going to have a hybrid orientation, or at least some form of the two. And when it went all online, I think we were well prepared for it, considering St. Mike's did a really good job of providing us with training, specifically focused on fostering inclusivity and representing that St. Mike's spirit. Even though it was online. And so I think the only thing that I would have liked more training on is just like, how reading people online, because that's a little hard, I think, for everyone. And especially like you can't really see if your orientees are struggling in an event just like by looking at their camera, because like I think Ingrid mentioned before, there's a lot that could be going on off screen as well. So I think if anything, just how to read people online, and I think that's the only training that I would think of that we would need more of.
Yeah, if I could just add on to that, I wholeheartedly agree. I like really have to give props to the university and like our college for just like providing with such like in-depth training. I definitely feel like they definitely added a few more hours to training this year, just because, things are so different this year. Even if you've been a leader in like some other aspect, it just really isn't the same as like what it is online. And something that I really enjoyed about like the training this year was just how like specific they went with the scenario. So I'd say we were pretty prepared for it, just because, we already discussed the issue with time zones during training, and also just like the case of like bad Wi-Fi. Like, how can you support an orientee when they don't have the Wi-Fi speed to keep like activities open and whatnot? And for us, that was kind of just like, if I could share like an anecdote, it was like when we were playing Scriblio, I think one of our orientees just couldn't connect to it, so instead I just screen shared my own screen. So like she wasn't playing the game, but she was still guessing along with all of us by either typing in the chat or just unmuting her mic and just saying her guess. But it definitely really required creativity this year to kind of just tackle challenges, which is super tough, but I think very rewarding.
Yeah, I can definitely see how challenges that you guys were faced with can kind of like, you can kind of use technology to kind of deal with it. I feel like screen sharing is a really like creative idea to deal with challenges like that. So moving on to our fourth question. What was your most memorable moment during your experience as a Frosh leader during online orientation? Yeah, you guys can go for it.
I think one of my most memorable moments was honestly like, I think I've talked about playing games like so often, but honestly, that was just one of the things I really enjoyed. And I think that was one of the things that most orientees enjoyed as well, just the social aspect of it, whether it be in like a big group of 20 or whether we like split down further into like little groups of like 3 or 4. It was just a really good way to really interact and socialize with orientees. And it really, like, it was painful in the eyes because I was staring at a screen for 12 hours a day, but like it was super great just to get to know orientees more. And I think by playing games, you always just get to know someone's personality better as well. So those were definitely one of my favorite moments. And yes, if I may add just one more thing, it was also just like, they were giving out, our college was giving out many gift cards throughout the week. And because we'd always try to like encourage our orientees, every time one of our orientees would guess something correct, everyone would just go cheer for them in the chat. So they'd just be like, oh yay, this X person X, person Y, or like just like cheer them on. And I think that was super wholesome, and I really enjoyed that about orientation.
Yeah, I would have to say the same, just because the group that we had this year, they were really great and they were really competitive. And so I think because they were all super competitive, it just kind of fostered our own little community, because they were, just really excited when one of our members got an answer right or won a prize. And yeah, so I think for me, it was just anytime we also had a social event, it was just really fun. And we got to learn a lot about orientees and, you know, their fears and what they were expecting for university. And I think that the social events, I think we got more questions during the social events than we did during like, you know, our academic panels and whatnot. So I think, yeah, I would have to say the social events.
Cool. That's some great stories that you've shared. For our next question, what lessons or insight have you gained from this experience? So we know you talked about being creative and thinking up solutions on the spot, as well as kind of getting used to this new form of social interaction. So was there anything else that really stuck with you from this experience?
I think for me, I've definitely gained more of an appreciation and awareness for international students and what they had to go through. Especially because I don't think I'll ever be put in a situation where I've had to, you know, been told to wake up at 4 for, you know, an event or whatever. But yeah, it's definitely given me an awareness and more kind of insight into what they've gone through. And I think going forward, that's something I'll definitely be carrying with me, especially when planning events or anything like that in the future.
Yeah, I totally agree with Athalia. It's just given me a bigger appreciation for what you know, leaders do, and just like even you guys at like COVID-19 recovery, just like people who have to, you know, use like creative methods to come up with new ideas to try and engage people, because we all know like it's hard to do almost anything during this pandemic. And I think just I've gotten a bigger appreciation of trying to, you know, really just use creativity, because to be honest, I'm not a super creative person. I'm kind of very like, let's just get XYZ done in the fastest way possible. But I think I definitely learned that, you know, this method really doesn't work for everyone. So like what works for me may work different for like everyone else in the world. And I think just trying to, you know, look more into details and not the overall picture, especially because, you know, every student is different and they're feeling different too when they enter university. And I think this is definitely something I didn't really think about the first time I was an orientation leader. So, you know, going forward, if I'm an orientation leader again next year, I think just having things online and so different just really, you know, made me really think about what it meant to be a leader and what you should be like, you know, showcasing to like first year students at university.
Based on what you guys have like experience being orientation leader this year, what do you think could be maybe done better next year for orientation if it was like online?
That's a super great question. I think maybe one thing perhaps is having 2 different timetables. I know like not all leaders were in Toronto at the time as well. I know a couple people in Vancouver, and even though Vancouver isn't too far away, it's still, you know, the 10 a.m. start meant that you're up at 7 a.m. just trying to like, you know, still get your energy going, because it still required everyone like a lot of energy to just kind of hype the orientees up, just because I didn't realize this before, but definitely this year made me realize that how you present yourself will definitely reflect on everyone else around you. So if you have like a bright and like cheerful personality, you know, it might reflect on the orientees better and they might be more excited. But I think definitely having 2 timetables would have made the event a lot more inclusive for those in Europe and Asia to participate in like more socials or more academic events that they couldn't participate in. And I think maybe for next year, I think they should be providing blue light glasses for everyone, because my eyes were strained a lot by the end of the week. So, but yeah, those 2 things what I would be improving on if I could participate in it again next year.
Yeah, I think for me it would also just be the accommodation for international students and just the extra timetable. And yeah, I think that would be it for me.
I think with the amount of time everything happened, like it was like so unexpected with this pandemic, but you guys are really able to pull through and like host a really good orientation, it sounds like. Yeah, I think probably next year we have like a better idea of like what could be done more efficiently, I think. And that's
Perfect.
yeah, that's good for next year.
Yeah, definitely. And we couldn't have done it without the help of our coordinators, our student life associate, and our marshals as well, who like worked extremely hard. I know like Athalia and I, we might just stay up till like 1 a.m. just like, texting our not mentees, our orientees, asking if they'd come to our event the next day. But I know like a lot of the marshals and like the coordinators, they were up until like 4 or 5 a.m. just trying to finish stuff for the next day. And they were just like, last minute arrangement. So it was definitely a team effort. I think we'd both agree on that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think even if the experience wasn't perfect, or you had some small things come up on the way, as long as like people had fun and they enjoyed the experience, I think that's ultimately like a really good goal to look to.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to ask the audience or anyone on Facebook if they have any questions for our guest speakers or anything you're curious about.
I actually had a question. First of all, I think it's an incredible story that you told us so far. I really enjoyed listening to it. Something I was wondering is how many students is each leader responsible for?
So normally if it were in person, up to 30, and then since it was online, I think we had a little more orientation leaders this year, so I think it was 10 to 15.
Oh wow, okay, so you would just get their phone numbers and you just text them like, hey, are you coming to the event tomorrow, things like that?
Yeah, so at the beginning, St. Mike's had a Corpus page set up so that we were able to, we had the Toronto mail emails of our orientees, so we were able to make a page and then figure out their socials, and then from there we just usually make like a Facebook group or an Instagram group chat, and then yeah.
Wow, that sounds like a tremendous amount of effort by everyone's parts. Really cool.
So I actually had the same question as Leo. I was curious as to how many people each individual leader is personally responsible for. And I just remembered like when I was doing orientation, and it wasn't at U of T, but I think it was a group of like maybe 15 people. And then there were like 3 orientation leaders available for like the whole, like for the entire group. And I do remember them like texting me and stuff, but nowhere near to the extent that you guys described for your online orientation this year. And I guess I just like to say you guys did a really great job, because I think it's really important to like pay attention to how these orientees are doing. And like, it's true, it's very hard to tell and like over online and if you can't see them face to face. So yeah, you guys just did a great job.
Thank you. Yeah, about your first question though, I think I don't think we necessarily like delegated our orientees to each like individual member. I think again it was like 10 to like maybe like 15 to 20, I'd say, within our group. And we had 4 orientation leaders, but we kind of just when we say message orientees, we definitely focused on those who weren't necessarily showing up, because the orientees that show up over and over again, they're gonna come back the next day because they already enjoyed themselves. And I definitely agree with you. Like I'd say when in-person orientation was still a thing, I honestly was not messaging my orientees as much. Like I think because it was online and because we knew that like, it was just so much more harder this year. We really wanted to make it a good experience for our orientees as well.
Thanks for like addressing my question.
Any other comments?
I had a follow-up question. So I remember back when I did orientation, this is like 6 years ago, there were a lot of competition between different groups. So I was just wondering, since you had like 15 people under you, but then like are there so I guess are there orientees competing with other groups as well, like inter-group games, I guess?
Yeah, so we had to, for St. Mike's orientation, we have this thing called O Cup, Orientation Cup. So the more your orientees participate and win events and games, stuff like that, you get points assigned, and the orientation group with the most points wins O Cup for that year. And we won O Cup this year just because our orientees
Nice.
were great and love participating. And yeah, so it was just kind of like foster that challenge between the groups. So it was more encouraging for students to participate and keep coming, because I guess they just had that goal of, you know, winning O Cup.
Yeah, that sounds incredible that everyone's working towards the same goal, and then even though the situation is kind of difficult, everyone made the best of it. Yeah. Okay, I guess if nobody else has any questions, we can close it off here. Ingrid and Athalia, thank you guys so much for sharing your story with us. And I think this is a really incredible learning opportunity for everybody involved. And you know, myself, like I haven't been involved in orientation in a long time. So learning about how people are overcoming the struggles really, really is interesting for me. So thanks again for coming out and talking to us. And then CC will send you guys a follow-up email along with some gift cards and stuff, you know, similar to what you guys are doing.
Thank you so much for joining us.
All right.
All right, take care. Have a good night.
Yep, you too.
Thank you.
See ya.